Welcome back, everyone, to another week of Ramban ala Parsha. This week we have the schus of reading Parshas Vayetze. Vayetze obviously is the story of the creation of Bnei Yisrael, literally, and Am Yisrael to a certain extent. Right? It begins with Yaakov running away from Esav, and coming to the house of Lavan, and eventually marrying 4 women and having 12 sons, and that becomes the continuation of Am Yisrael. And what I'd like to focus on, at least for the most part, is the character of Yaakov Avinu and the sense we get. Often we think, and maybe it's my fault that I emphasize these, that the Ramban, sees fault in the Avot. But here, there are 2 really, really interesting Rambans that I think point to the Ramban's sense of loving Yaakov and defending Yaakov almost against Pshuto Shel Mikra. So let's start with the first example of this. Leah obviously becomes Yaakov's wife, not by accident, but probably also not by her doing. Right? The sense you get in the Psukim is that Lavan substituted Leah for Rachel, the famous medrash, that Rachel then gave the simanim to Leah because she saw that she was going to be humiliated. Okay, so then we have the following. Leah has children. Vatahar od vateled bein vatomer ki shama Adonai ki sinua anochi vayiten li gam et zeh vatikra shemo Shimon. Vaya Hashem ki sinua anochi. I'm hated. That's harsh. And I think the Ramban is sensitive to the fact that, if she's hated, there's only one culprit, and that's her husband, Yaakov. Did Yaakov really hate Leah? So the Ramban is going to give us 2 possibilities. One, pshat, and one maybe deeper than pshat. So says the Ramban. The Torah says, let's go back one. Vaya Hashem ki sinua anochi. Or ki sinua Leah. So the Ramban says, look, Hine, Leah rimta ba'achota gam Yaakov. Leah cheated her sister, by getting married to Yaakov in Rachel's place, but also Yaakov she cheated. Ki im noma shenahaga kavod be'avia, she'achaz ba'vich nisa elav va'al tamer bo. Let's say, says the Ramban, that Lavan forced her into it. Lavan said, no, you're the oldest, you need to get married first. And on some level, it would have been maybe disrespectful to Lavan if Leah rejected that offer and she refused to get married to Yaakov. Okay? So fine. So he says, but if that's the case, Hayala lahagid o lirmoz kihi Leah. She should have in some way let Yaakov Avinu know that it wasn't Rachel. In addition to that, the Ramban says, Afki hayta mitnakeret kol halayla. All night long, when they had relations, she pretended to be her sister. Ulefikach lohi kira ad shera'a uta baboker. And Yaakov Avinu then didn't recognize her, says the pasuk, till the morning, till he saw her. V'lachein sina'a Yaakov. And for that reason, Yaakov Avinu hated her. Because he said to himself, yes, it could be that you had no choice but to marry me, because that's what Lavan wanted. Okay, well, when we got back to the honeymoon suite, you should have let me know in some way that you weren't Rachel. And you didn't do that. And you could see that would really, infuriate, that would really frustrate Yaakov Avinu. And he may be a tzaddik, but there may have been reason for him to hate Leah. Now, says the Ramban, Vo Elokim yodea ki lihi naseh el atzadik asta kain v'richei malel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew something that Yaakov didn't know. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that Leah did this l'shem shamayim. Yaakov in his own mind was just Yaakov. He wasn't Yaakov Avinu. He wasn't the third of the Avot. He was a person who was morally, compromised. He had stolen the brachot at the request of his mother, and in fact, the Medrash talks about Yaakov being furious at Leah for cheating him, and Leah saying, "What? You didn't do the same thing to your father? Isn't it Mida Keneged Mida? Yes, I cheated you, but you cheated Esav." And you could see how that would really, really stick in Yaakov's craw. That would really upset him. Okay, so, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, Leah did it l'shem shamayim. She wanted to marry Yaakov Avinu. She wanted to be one of the imahot. V'kach amu b'reishit rabbah. Kevan shera'a Yaakov ma'asim shirim talea ba'achota natan da'ato ligarsha. The Medrash says, Yaakov was so angry that he decided to divorce Leah, which is really like a question you should ask yourself. Okay, Lavan cheated Yaakov and got him to marry Leah. But the next day he could have divorced her. He could have said, it wasn't the deal. She's not my wife. I'm going to marry Rachel. But he didn't do that. So the Medrash explains, V'kevan shepakda HaKadosh Baruch Hu bibanim, since presumably Leah became pregnant immediately. And Yaakov saw what was going on. Amar li'iman shel elu ani megaresh. So Yaakov rethought it. I'm going to divorce this mother. She's going to be a single mother. I'm going to take the children. Right there. There is no divorce in the Torah. I mean, there's the halach of divorce. But there's nobody, I think, in Chamisha Chumshi Torah who ever actually gets divorced. So then he saw that and he said, V'zetam vayar Elokim, ki chamal aleh shelo ya'azvena. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had rachamim on Leah, and therefore he gave her children immediately, and that saved her marriage to Yaakov. But according to the first pshat of the Ramban, it's yes, Yaakov Avinu was furious with Leah. He hated her for what she had done, especially for the whole night long when she could have told him at any point that she was Leah and she didn't, and he held that against her. So kind of, it's a justified hatred. But says the Ramban in the second pshat, V'yesh omrim, no, ki shtayim nashim ha'achat ahuva ma'od, tikra hashniya sinua kenegda. Says the Ramban, the Torah says it later on in Sefer Dvarim, right? Ki tiena le'ish shtei nashim, ha'achat ahuva v'achat sinua. Right? V'yaldulo vanim ha'ahuva v'hasnua v'haya bein ha'bachar la'siniya. So first of all, many mefarshim, maybe we'll do it when we get there, many mefarshim say that's exactly what happened with Yosef and the brothers. That's exactly what happened with Yaakov and his sons. That Leah was a sinua and Rachel was the ahuva. But that's not what the Ramban is going to say here. The Ramban is going to say, no, when you love one wife, the other one by definition becomes a sinua, not because she's hated, but because she's number two. And that's a painful thing to be. And we'll see this in a later Ramban today. But that's a painful thing to be. Kimo shamar, vayahav gamet Rachel mileah. That pasuk is inconsistent with ours. Vayahav gamet Rachel mileah means he loved both. But he loved Rachel more. He's a human being. She's the one he met first. She's the one he worked for 7 years. She's the one he loved. So Leah, by definition, becomes a sinuan. Not because Yaakov hated her, God forbid, but because when you're not the beloved, the other word for the second wife, for the least favorite wife in the Torah is sinua. Now, he says, V'haita bosha b'davar. Somehow, it was even more embarrassing to Leah. Yaakov didn't hate her, but he loved Rachel more, and presumably everybody knew that. And Leah being number two, and literally she's number two, meaning she's not number two because she's hated. She's number two because there's a number one. And okay, if you're number two in the polls, that's not terrible. Okay, you're almost number one. But if you're number two in the wives, that's terrible. Your perception is that your husband hates you. And so God rewarded her because of the perception that she was hated. But again, the first pshat is, yes, Yaakov really hated her, and he hated her for good reason. That's a defense of Yaakov's character. The second one is even more of a defense of Yaakov's character. He didn't hate her. The other psukim made clear he loved her. He just didn't love her as much as Rachel. To Leah, that made her snua. That's what the Torah calls wife number two. Not because she's hated, but just because she's wife number two, she becomes a sinua, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewarded her for being this sinua, and she had all the children that she had. Okay, that's the first point. Now, second point. How could it be that Yaakov Avinu reacted so negatively to Rachel when she asked him to daven for her? Vater Rachel ki lo yalada Yaakov vatekaneh Rachel ba'achota vatomer Yaakov hava li vanim v'im ayin meita anochi. Right? Vayicharaf Yaakov berachel vayomer hatachat Elokim anochi Hashem ana mimech privaten. It's a mean thing to say, right? Am I in place of God? God's not giving you children. It's not me. Says the Ramban. Hava li banim amru mefarshim shetitpalel alai, which does seem like pshuto shel mikra. Vim ayin meita anochi. That's Rashi. Rashi says shemi she'ein lo banim chashuv kemeit. V'hu midrash rabotenu. Vani tameh, says Ramban. I don't get it. Im kain lama chara po. So why did Yaakov get so angry? Yes, Rachel was an akara, and he should have done. V'lama amar atachat Elokim anochi v'shomei tzadikim Hashem. God listens to prayer, right? Chazal say in a number of places that God made the imahot akarot because He wanted their tefillos. Shomei tzadikim Hashem. Uma shamar Abba lo hayu lo banim, ani yesh li banim. Mimech mana, mimeni lo mana. What a mean thing to say. The Medrash says that Yaakov said to her, I have children. It's you that God is refusing to give children to, not me. Okay, but Yaakov Avinu was a tzaddik. Why wouldn't he down for his own wife, for his beloved wife? They weren't even Jewish women, but they supported them and they prayed for them. So at this point, the Ramban is saying, yeah, that's why Chazal, got Yaakov. That's why Chazal were angry at Yaakov. That's how you respond to a woman in distress. Right? On my life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lashon Shvua, your children, meaning Reuven, Shimon, Leah, etc., will have to stand in judgment in front of Yosef, the child of Rachel, which is what happened. Okay, so right now Yaakov doesn't sound good at all. But says Ramban, Valder Chapshat Amra Rachel Yaakov Sheitein Labanim. The simple pshat in the pasuk is Rachel said, "Give me children." Ubemet da'ata lomar sheyitpalel aleha. Yes, she meant daven for me, but not a regular davening. Rather, says the Ramban, Aval sheyitpalel aleha ad sheyitein labanim al kol panim v'imayin shetamit atzma b'tza'ar. She's going to commit suicide. Yaakov should tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, listen, if you don't give Rachel children, she's going to kill herself. And says the Ramban, Dibra shelo kahogen b'kinata. Right? Her jealousy of her sister Leah caused her to speak improperly and threaten suicide. V'chashva ki ba'avata ota yit'aneh Yaakov v'yilbash sakva efer. He won't just daven. He'll demand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He'll wear sakva efer. He'll wear sackcloth. He'll fast. He'll tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, do this, or that's the end. V'yitpalel ad sheyiyeh lo banim shelo tamut b'tzara. So that's what Yaakov Avinu objected to. He was happy to daven for her, and he would have davened for her, and he almost certainly did daven for her. But he didn't feel like he was in a position to demand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give her children, or if not, she's going to kill herself. That seemed inappropriate to Yaakov Avinu, and that's what he objected to. Now, let's keep going. The next pasuk, and this is the main point. The Ramban says, Vayichar af Yaakov, she'ein tfilat hatzadikim biyadam shetishma v'ta'aneh al kol panim. Says the Ramban, and we know this in our own lives, that God listens to tfilot. But it's not like if you're a tzaddik, God is obligated to listen to your tefillah. Sometimes tzaddikim are turned down also. Uba'avur shedibra derech gaguei hanashim ha'ahuvot lahafchido b'mitata chara apo. And because she threatened him, Yaakov Avinu loved Rachel, but you could feel the pressure he felt from Rachel saying, "Give me children," and Yaakov saying, "I'm trying my hardest." But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not doing it. And then he got angry at her because she threatened suicide and she threatened consequences for God not listening to Yaakov. And the sense you get is, Yaakov says, I'm doing my best. I'm davening every day. I'm saying Tehillim. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. God says no. Yaakov even said, it's not up to me. Yes, I'm the son of Yitzchak. Yes, I'm the grandson of Avraham Avinu. But sometimes God says no. And you don't seem to care about that. And he's angry and he says, Ki mimena nimna pri habaten v'lo mimenu. God is saying no to you, not to me. Well, the Ramban's going to explain that, because that's the harshest line. He says, it's like he's slapping her across the face. She needs to understand what's going on. Vihine. Hatzadeket bir'ota shelo tuchal lihisamech al tfilat Yaakov. When she realized that she can't rely on her husband. It's not something that Yaakov Avinu has within his power to do. If he did, certainly she would have been the mother of, tens of kids. Shava lehitpalel atzma. Once she realized that, she davened for herself. Kel shomeat tzaka v'zeu vayishma eleha elokim. Right? The pasuk doesn't tell us that she davened, but the pasuk says that God answered her, which is different than her mother. Not her mother. There's different than Yaakov's mother. Right? The Torah there says, we discussed this last week, vayishma elav elokim, that God answered the prayer of Yitzchak and not Rivka. Here the Torah says God answered the prayer of Rachel, and so we know for a fact that Rachel davened. V'zeh vayishma elav elokim, v'ulai nitaken al dat rabotenu. And now he says, this is the main point of the Ramban, his main defense of Yaakov Avinu. Ki Yaakov efshar shelo nitpalel al ishto ha'ahuva ki akarahi. It's impossible that Yaakov Avinu didn't daven for his wife, for his beloved wife, for his number one wife, who was prevented by nature and by God from having children. Ela shalonit kablat tfilato. His tefillah wasn't accepted. Uva'a ata Rachel hitolel alav leimo sheyitain la banim al kol panim bitfilato. Rachel comes and says, no, you have to demand of God that he does this. Ki lo nofel hu me'aviv sha'sakein. Rachel compared Yaakov to Yitzchak and compared herself to Rivka. And she said, just like Yitzchak davened to God and he gave your mother children, you have to do it for me. And then, with that comparison, like Yaakov felt hurt. Vayichar apo, and he got angry. Va'amar lo ki adavar biyad elokim v'lo biyado. It's not up to him, it's up to God. Now, the main point. Va'aviv nishma'a tefilato shehud tzadik. Okay, it's true, his father was a tzadik. Va'atid lihiyot lo zera. Aval hi nimna mimena pribaten v'nachonhu. The main point, says the Ramban, God promised my father children. He had no children. So when Yitzchak Avinu davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he could demand, look, you told me I'm going to have children, you have to give me children. You have to fulfill your promise. But says Yaakov, and not in a mean way, God promised me children, but he gave me children already. Yes, I'm sad that the children I got are through my number 2 wife, through Leah, and not through you. I'm sad. But I can't make demands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he already fulfilled his promise. I can just ask. And that's really the bottom line. Says the Ramban, Yaakov Avinu wasn't disrespecting Rachel. He loved Rachel. But he felt put upon and he felt pressured. She was demanding of him something that he couldn't deliver. Because God loves tefillos, it's true, but God decides on his own which tefillos he's going to respond to and which tefillos he's not going to respond to. And so therefore, Yaakov Avinu kind of felt like he was being pressured by Rachel unfairly, and he responded in anger, but in anger, according to the Ramban, that's justified. Okay, so there are 2 places already where the Ramban defends Yaakov's character, both in the fact that he didn't really hate Leah, and second, in the fact that he wasn't as mean to Rachel as the psukim seem to imply. Okay, let's do one more Ramban. Says the Torah, okay? The story goes, Rachel stole the trafim, some type of idol, some type of method of divination from her father. And then Lavan chases Yaakov, mostly chases Yaakov because, Yaakov left with his grandchildren and with his daughters, but also looking for the trafim. Okay? And so the pasuk says that Yaakov says, fine, look wherever you want. And he looks wherever he wants, and he can't find it because Rachel was hiding it under the saddle of the camel, and she told her father that she couldn't get up. Okay, now, all of a sudden, Vayichar li Yaakov vayorev b'Lavan. Yaakov gets furious and he argues with Lavan. Vayan Yaakov vayomer Lavan, ma pishi ma chatati ki dalakta acharai. Right? Why all of a sudden you're chasing me? Ki mishashtad kol kalei ma matzata mikol klei beiti simko neged achai v'achacha v'yochichu bein shnenu. And then he goes on, Ze esrim shana anochi imach rechelecha v'zecha lo shikelu b'leitzoncha lo achalti treifah lo avei. I worked night and day for you for 20 years, and you're treating me like a crook, and you're treating me disrespectfully, and you're accusing me of all kinds of terrible things. That's not right. And the Ramban explains as follows. Vayichar li Yaakov vayorev b'Lavan. It's really an interesting insight, says the Ramban. Mitchila natan lo rishut lechapes. Originally, Yaakov Avinu said to Lavan, okay, look wherever you want. Ki amar im asher timtzat elokecha va'amar neged achreinu haker lecha ma imadi ve'eich yimtza im lo yichapes v'yimashesh. Right? Yaakov Avinu can't say to Lavan, it's not here. He has to say to Lavan, look, and if you find it, put it between us, and we'll see who's right and who's wrong. Aval mitchila, this is the genius of the Ramban. He says originally, haya choshesh ulai achat hanashim o ha'avadim ganvu et elokav. Yaakov didn't know for sure that he knew he didn't steal it. He didn't know that somebody else in his party didn't steal it. He didn't know it wasn't one of his wives. He didn't know it was one of his grandchildren, one of his slaves. So he had to let Lavan look. Va'ata bir'oto ki einami mahem chara po. But now that he saw that it wasn't anybody, now he's furious. Ki amar lo avadet elokav rak to'anahu mevakesh mimeni. He thought, Lavan knows that the Trafim weren't stolen. He has them. He's looking for excuses to punish Yaakov. Amar lo lama dalakta acharai ki yirdof hadam acharei ganav. Why'd you chase me like I'm a thief? Hinei lo matzata imi mikol klei beitcha davar vaya ra'ui lo li lakachat mimcha kol ma she'uchal. Not only didn't you find something that belongs to you here, I should have taken stuff from you. I worked for you for all those years, and you kept changing, how much I'm supposed to be paid, and that seems like it's a true thing. The Ramban elsewhere says, Yaakov Avinu wouldn't say to Lavan, Lavan would know if it wasn't true. It must be that it really was true. So all of a sudden, Yaakov feels the ability, and maybe even the obligation, to air all of his grievances with Lavan and to complain bitterly about how he was treated. Even animals that died on their own, you would make me pay you for them. None of these things were the halacha, none of these things were required, but I went lifnim mishura sadin, I did all these things for you, and you weren't at all grateful. And so the sense you get in the Ramban is that Yaakov Avinu had all these grievances, and they were all correct. But when Lavan chased him, he did leave without telling Lavan, right? And there was a sense of, vayignov et leiv Lavan ha'arami, that by taking his daughters and by taking his grandchildren without saying goodbye, and he had good reason for it, but maybe Yaakov in his heart felt a little guilty about that. And when Lavan catches up to him and accuses him of stealing the Trafim, Yaakov Avinu has no choice, A, but to let him do it, and B, not to respond in anger, because he couldn't be sure that, in fact, one of his party didn't steal the Trafim. But when Lavan goes into everybody's tent and goes back to the tent of Rachel and can't find anything, and he then Yaakov Avinu gets the self-confidence and feels like this is all a setup. It's just another trick from Lavan. He's going to pretend now that I stole the Trafim. He has the Trafim. He knows I didn't steal it, but he's going to pretend. He's going to treat me like a thief. He's going to disrespect me. Now I'm going to let him have it. And then Yaakov, goes in this whole soliloquy saying, I worked for you for 20 years, night and day, right? Right? In good weather, in bad weather, I did everything for you. And you made claims against me that weren't acceptable under the current law, weren't acceptable under the future law either. And I did it anyway, and I paid you for them. Because I wanted to do the right thing with you. Because I am, after all that I've been through with you, with Esav, ish tam. I'm an honest, complete, fair person. And you're taking advantage of me. And now I'm telling you that it's wrong, and that leads to the peace treaty or some kind of treaty that they make, whether it's right or wrong. But that's really the end of this week's parsha. That Yaakov Avinu finally has the strength of character to tell Lavan what he really thinks, to accuse Lavan of all these things that Lavan really did, and to clear his conscience and to tell him all these things. And Lavan apparently takes it well, because Lavan then says, okay, let's make a deal. You'll be good to my daughters. You won't pass this gal hazeh, and I won't pass it l'ra'ah. And somehow that's what will be. And in fact, that's what did happen. We never really hear of Lavan again. That's just an episode in Yaakov Avinu's life and in the formation of Klal Yisrael. And based on that, Yaakov Avinu moves forward. So basically, we saw in the Ramban this week a lot of defense of Yaakov Avinu's character. A lot of times where you'd say to yourself, and it's often said, and it's said for a reason, the Torah describes Yaakov as Ishtam, but he was anything but. Look at his life and look at all the people he cheated. But the Torah, here the Ramban goes out of his way to say that Yaakov Avinu was a straight person, was an honest person. His responses were appropriate and proper for the situation. Either Leah deserved to be hated, or he didn't really hate Leah, he just loved Rachel more. He was never mean to Rachel. Rachel asked of him things he should do what his father did, but says the Ramban, his father had no children, so he could demand of God to fulfill his promise, I have children. And finally, his relationship with Lavan, in which the Ramban points out, and the Psukim seem to point out, that he says all these things to Lavan, they must be true. He really worked incredibly hard and incredibly honestly for Lavan. And Lavan really did mistreat him, and Lavan really did ask of him things that were not the din, were not the halacha, that shouldn't have been, and he did all of them. And in the end, Lavan still treats him like a crook. Now, we know that Rachel stole the trafim, it's true. But Yaakov didn't know this, and Lavan didn't know this, and Yaakov takes advantage of that situation to basically tell Lavan how he's been mistreated all these years. Lavan accepted that, they made a peace treaty, and the story continues. Okay, that's it for this week. Yashkoch to everybody, and see you next week, God willing.